Dugout Nation, welcome to the Dugout CEO podcast. Fired up about today's show. We are joined by Cade Griffis, who is the founder and CEO of DBAT Sports, a company that provides a quality teaching environment with professional instruction to enhance the baseball and softball experience for players at all levels and will help them reach their goals. DBAT has over 150 franchise locations, and as a former multi-unit developer and owner of 5 DBAT locations, they are truly an all-star organization. Cade, welcome to the Dugout CEO.
Thanks, Casey. Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. You're one of my first business mentors and have just meant a ton to me in my life. And it's just super good to have you on the show.
I was actually thinking about it this morning driving to work. The night you stayed at my house, first time we met.
Yeah, it takes a lot to trust somebody that quickly, but we kind of hit it off right away. And your love for baseball and business and life and mine as well. And just super cool and cool to circle back after all these years.
Yeah, it sure is.
Well, tell me more, you as a baseball guy. Everybody knows you as a CEO of DBAT and what you've built there, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you as a baseball guy, how'd you fall in love with the game? And talk about you as a player first.
You know, I grew up in Louisiana, and my dad was a ball player, and you know, I don't know, I just had this drive as a young kid. I'd go outside, and we had a we kind of lived in the country, so I'd go outside and I'd hit a ball all the way across the field and walk over and get it and hit it back, and I just kind of played with myself, really. My brother, who actually works for me, was more of a football player. He didn't want to go out in the yard and play with me that much, and I think I wore everybody out in the neighborhood and my brother, because that's all I wanted to do was play wiffle ball and baseball. But I just had a deep love for it, and growing up in the South, all we got on TV was either WGN, which was the Cubs, or TBS, which was the Braves. And so I grew up as a huge Braves fan, and just watching them on TV and watching Harry Carey as well on the WGN network. And I just remember, as a kid, falling asleep on the floor watching, Cubs and the Braves play. But I just had a deep love for it, and I was lucky enough, when I moved to Texas when I was a sophomore in high school, and I ended up I actually signed to play college football first, and right before I was supposed to report my freshman year that summer, I ended up deciding I wanted to pursue baseball, and went to junior college for a year. And I had a really good year. Was an All-American, freshman All-American in JUCO, and then ended up at Dallas Baptist, and got to play all the big Big 12. Back then it was called the Southwest Conference. Played all those schools: Rice and Texas and A&M and Baylor and all them, and was lucky enough to sign with Kansas City and went on to play pro ball. And it's just been, it's one of those things. Baseball is one of the hardest sports to give up. That's why you have a lot of men's league baseball teams, and you have softball. They even have. Someone told me the other day they were on an over 60 baseball team. I was like, over 60. I wish I could run the bases when I'm 60, but it's just that one sport. You don't see old football players still playing football. And it's that one sport. I think it gets in their blood, and it's hard to give up.
Yeah. So Dallas Baptist, I know you had a heck of a career over there. Anything that kind of jumps out at you, amazing games or anything like that?
Yeah. I had a few. Probably the best doubleheader I ever had was when I was in JUCO. I hit 3 home runs and had 18 RBIs, and I threw a one-hit shutout, and I was National Player of the Month one time. So that was a pretty good weekend. But at DBU, probably the couple that stick out is obviously the one I hit 4 home runs and 4 at bats, and tied the national NCAA record, and was on USA Today, wrote an article about it. And tell you a kind of a funny story about that. No one had ever hit 5 in a row and 5 at bats. there was a guy a few years ago that hit 5 home runs in one game, but I think he had 9 at bats. It was like 28 to something, the score, but he didn't hit them in a row. I think he popped out his 3rd at bat or something. But so I show up to the park the next day, and all these news cameras were in the outfield, and they were raising the towers above the outfield wall, and there was news vans. There was probably about, I don't know, 5 or 6 news vans. And for DBU, that was kind of a big deal back then. You know, we were a small school and wasn't, you know, we didn't get the press that, you know, University of Texas or A&M got. But so this was kind of a big deal. And in my first at bat, I probably hit the hardest ball I had hit for that weekend, including, you know, harder than any of the 4 home runs I hit. And I hit a line shot dead center, and we had a pretty tall wall, and it just didn't have enough backspin on it. It ended up hitting about the middle of the wall. And I remember I thought I hit it out, and so I kind of pimped it, was jogging a little bit. So I had to pick it up, and I had to slide it in second. And there was a play at second. Slid in safe, and I remember I pumped my fist, you know, because it was in the first inning. I drove a run in, and next thing I start hearing all this noise, and all the towers started lowering, and I ended up getting the third on the next batter, and there's a big hill at DBU that when you drive out of the stadium, you go up this hill, and I saw all the news vans just driving up the hill, and I thought to myself, golly, I just hit the hardest ball I've ever hit, and you know, they don't even want an interview. I mean, it was like, well, he didn't do it. Let's get out of here. You know, so I didn't get any praise for that line drive double.
Really cool. So obviously a huge baseball guy, a fan, a player, and then turned it into a professional career, and then leaving professional baseball. Talk to me about the journey from being a professional baseball player to owning your own academy and turning that into DBAT.
Yeah, pro ball was a little bit of a culture shock for me, to be honest with you. Well, first off, I signed as a third baseman. I was a guy in college that I was good at a lot of positions, but a master at none. I should have been a catcher my entire career, but unfortunately, my sophomore year at DBU, my roommate was Jason LaRue, who 11-year big leaguer behind the plate. So I was kind of the backup catcher, but they needed me in the lineup. I was the 3 or 4 hole hitter, so I played right field. And the next year, I thought when Jason got drafted, he was older than me. I thought, well, this is going to be my year to catch, and I'll be darned. We signed Brandon Harper, who ended up being a second round draft pick by the Marlins, who had maybe the best arm I'd ever seen. And but I did get to catch 10 or 12 games a year or so, but I was mainly the starting right fielder. But I played third, I pitched, and played first base, and I kind of, like I said, I was okay at a lot of positions, but a master at none. But when I signed to play third base, I remember I told the manager, and I was in Spokane, Washington, in low A ball. I said, I'm the worst third baseman in the history of Kansas City signing a third baseman. I'm not a third baseman. I'm an outfielder, but I'm really a catcher. And the roving catching instructor came in town, and I asked him if I could work out with. He had early work with our 3 catchers, and he told me to grab some gear. And I remember I went to the clubby, and there was no gear that matched. I had a blue chest protector with black shin guards. That was all he could scrounge up. And after that workout, he went to our manager and said, "Cade is now a catcher. I want him to start catching bullpens and warming up the pitchers and stuff." So I caught bullpens for about 20 straight games. It's the longest in my life I went was sitting the bench. And I got a couple pinch hits here and there, and I think I DH'd a couple games. But I ended up catching, and it was kind of a weird deal. My first game catching in Spokane, I caught a perfect game. Jordy Zimmerman, left-handed pitcher, threw a perfect game. And I was told that ball, they actually put that ball in Cooperstown. It's in a minor league section or whatever in Cooperstown. But and after that game, I got called into the skipper's office, and I honestly thought I was getting released. And so did the guys were sitting next to me in the locker that was next to me. when I came out of the meeting, I remember Jeremy Hill, big time catcher, and all the catchers sat together because our lockers were a little bigger, for our equipment. And he put his hand on me and said, "Man, are you okay? Is everything all right?" They all thought I was getting released. And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm getting moved up." So I got moved up halfway through the season after catching one game in Spokane. I got moved up to Lansing, Michigan. Their catcher had broke his thumb, and I ended up catching around 30 games in a row. Matter of fact, my hand was so bruised because I was catching left-handers like this. I didn't know how to turn my glove, and we ended up winning the Midwest League. And funny enough, I became a prospect because I was not a prospect. I was, they didn't have any money invested in me. I wasn't a, top 5 round draft pick or anything. And I instantly became a prospect. I got invited to Instructs. If you know anything about that, they invite the basically the top 4 players at every position. So I got invited to go straight to Instructs. So I went from college ball playing 100 games to minor league ball, and then I had to go straight into Instructs, and then I went straight into spring training. That was a rough 18 months, I will tell you. But Instructs was eye opening. But the thing that was really a culture shock for me in pro ball was coming from DBU. We were family team, obviously a Christian facility, or Christian college, and I wasn't used to the every man for himself, and you don't really want your own teammates to do well, because you're trying to move up, and I was all about the win. I wanted to win the game, I didn't care who got the winning hit. And I had one of my teammates actually explain that to me and said, "If you're not selfish, you're not going to make it." He actually made that comment to me, and so that was the part of pro ball I really didn't like that much, and that and the money. I remember my first paycheck was after they took out taxes and clubby dues was $238 for 2 weeks, and I just I got to the point, so I was in spring training, and I actually I hurt my first time I'd ever been injured. I hurt my arm. My arm I think I just had some inflamed tendons in my arm. So they wanted to shelf me for a few weeks at the end of spring training, but I was still hitting. I was DHing, and I had the best spring training of my life. I led the organization in doubles. I think I had 14 doubles in spring training. And when it got time to release the teams, I thought I was going to. I was on the AAA team pretty much the whole time in spring training. I thought I was going to get put in AA. And when they released the AA team, they told me I was going to be an extended spring training because of my injury. And I absolutely did not want to do that. And probably the only thing in my life, Casey, I ever quit. And so I went upstairs and I talked to Bob Hagman, who was a general manager of minor league baseball, head of minor league baseball, and told him I was hanging it up. He tried to talk me out of it, and I just made my mind up. Honestly, it was about the money. I needed to work, and it was tough to survive on bringing home less than $500 a month at the time. And he did me a huge favor. He told me, he said, "I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to release you because if you quit, we don't pay your way home." So he gave me a release and went back to Dallas. And I remember driving on the way from Fort Myers, Florida, all the way to Dallas. It was about 20-something hours, and thinking, what in the world am I going to do? I've never done anything other than worked in the oil field a little bit in the summer and played baseball. And about 3 weeks after I got home, the Cincinnati Reds called me, and they had a position open in AAA. And I asked them to give me a week or so to think about it, and I ended up not pursuing it. And honestly, I started DBAT, and I had it in my mind. I was already working on it, looking at real estate, trying to figure out how to do it. And interesting enough, about 6 months after I started DBAT, I got a call from Bob Hagman, the guy in Kansas City, and offered me the hitting job the next year in Spokane, which is where I played. And that was a dream of mine. I was like, oh my gosh, I had to turn it down. I told him, I said, I have a commitment. I moved my brother here to Dallas to start this business with me. I've signed a lease that I'm personally guaranteed on. And I just could not do it. The timing could not have been worse. If he'd have called me months before, it would have been interesting how my life would have probably changed, but
Sure.
anyway.
So that's what, 1998, you start DBAT, you call your brother, you get him in Texas, you get this thing going. Talk to me about one first, just for the listeners that don't know, what is DBAT? And then talk to me about the early years of your first location and then going from an instructor to, owning it to franchising it and so on.
Yeah, so I actually talk about this a little bit in my book, but I thought I invented the idea, and I was devastated to find out. It was a high school kid that I'd coached in the summer, who's now, interesting enough, he works for me here in the corporate office. He's our construction manager, Travis Slayton. He's been with us since day one. But when he was a high school kid, he told me, he goes, "Oh, that already exists. There's a baseball academy in Addison." And I actually had him take me to it because I wanted to see it. And when I remember when I walked in, I was honestly devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, I had this idea in my head, even in high school, that I wanted to do this. And but it was awesome because I got to meet Steve Adair, the owner. I ended up working for him, and unfortunately, he got cancer, and he sold it to a customer who owned a huge carpet company. Great guy, but he ran it as a hobby, and so I got to see Steve run a baseball academy really with an iron fist, and then I got to see a guy run it that was very passive and ran it as a hobby, and had his two sons working the front desk and all that. And matter of fact, I used to do, when I do presentations, my first slide used to say, "This is not a hobby." And if you're going to own one of these, you're thinking you're going to own one of these and run it as a hobby, or you have an alternative motive to try to get your kid an upper hand with a high school coach or select coach or whatever, this is not the job for you. Yep, I called my brother and asked him if he would do this with me. And shockingly enough, he quit his job. He had a really good job in Wichita Falls, Texas, and moved in my 1-bedroom apartment. We started looking for real estate, and found a building, and kind of went on from there. So, I mean, we ended up opening in November of 98.
So in November of 98, the first couple years, you're doing what in the business? Because I think a lot of our listeners, they could be, a business owner where they own one location of a business, or they have $1 million business or a 5 million, but they have a 10 or a $20 million vision, or they're running the day to day and they're like, okay, I don't want to be the person doing the same thing today that I'm doing a year from now. Like, I want to build a team. I want to expand. I want to grow. How did you go from one location to 2 locations and beyond? And what did that process look like?
I right before I opened up, I went and met with Steve Adair. He was pretty sick at this time, but and I told him what I was going to do, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Well, you better build a shower inside there because you're going to live it." And man, was that an understatement. My wife still to this day makes a joke that our neighbors thought I was a myth. They didn't even think I existed because I would get home late at night after they were in bed, and I would leave early in the morning before they got up. And I'll tell you, I lived it for the first couple of years. 7 days a week, every day. Our busiest days are on holidays. So there wasn't any holidays or any trips or anything like that. And I always kind of refer back to, I know, Casey, you're a fan of the show Shark Tank, but I'll never forget, there was a guy on the show, and he was I think it was a cupcake company or something, and he was wanting to franchise it. And Mark Cuban asked the guy, "Well, how is the the mothership location, your original location? What are the numbers you're doing at that location?" He goes, "Oh, I haven't done a location yet." And Mark Cuban said, "I'm out." He goes, if you're gonna franchise something, you got to get in the weeds, and you got to know it. And really those first 10, 11 years, my brother and I ran our single location. I really feel like we have a doctorate in baseball academies, right? We probably we know everything that could go wrong and might go wrong and all that. And I do think that's a good reason people need to think about if they're buying a franchise. Don't buy a franchise because of all the great things the company is going to tell you to do and they've done. Buy it because you want to hear the things that they did wrong. You buy a franchise to not make the same mistakes that the franchisor made and waste money in marketing or ideas that they tried. We tried it all. I mean, we wasted a lot of money over the years and made a lot of mistakes. And but putting the franchise system together, you don't want your franchisees to make those same mistakes. So we ran the single location for, like I said, 11 years. We knew we wanted to expand. We didn't know how we were going to. We looked at different options, licensing, franchising, and venture capitalist options. And we figured out franchising was the best route for us and to go. So we started, we filed for our FDD, I believe, in late '08 and opened our first, I think, 3 franchises in early '09 and been going balls to the walls ever since.
So those first few franchises, because I think the most important thing you can do, whether you're a franchise business or you're a non-franchise business and you're recruiting people to join your brand or join your company, is bring in the right people, whether it's an employee or it's a franchisee or whatever. What advice do you have for people that are looking to grow and expand their business to make sure they pick the right partners and right people to be in business with?
Man, Casey, that's a $1 million question. When we first started, I remember telling myself we're going to be very picky about who our owners are. Making sure there's no alternative agenda. There's a lot of people out there that have that can raise or have 500,000 or so in cash that can open up a baseball academy. There's a lot of people out there, but they're also you got to make sure that the alternative motives are aligned with our values as well. So, the advice I would give is you got to be extremely picky, especially on your first ones. Now, I have made a few mistakes in over the last 13 years of franchising, but I've only made about 3 of those. And as far as picking, ownership groups. But and you'll make some of those mistakes, but it's pretty vital not to make those mistakes early because you don't want closures and a lot of times closures don't happen because of the system. Closures happen because of bad management or they lose interest, right? So it's extremely important to pick the right franchisees and to pick your partners. I mean, we've been fortunate here. Most of the staff here, or a lot of the staff here, has been with us forever. And having my brother really kind of working side by side. If you can't trust your brother, you can't trust anybody, right? So, but yeah, it's a great question, Casey. And it's very, very important, and people need to understand that.
So let's talk about the family dynamic a little bit. You called your brother; he was your first call. What was it what was it about Kyle that led you to say, hey, I want to call him? Was it just because he was your brother and you could trust him, or did he have a different skill set than you? What did that look like?
100%. He had a different skill set than me. He is, I call him the wire nerd. He understands, the computers and software and technology. And he had a retail background. He worked at our car audio, home theater retail store. I had no retail background. I was the baseball guy. Matter of fact, I used to tell people I took care of the back of the house, the lessons and the camps and the instructors and all that. And he took care of the front of the house, the pro shop and the financial part of the business and all that. So it wasn't just because he was my brother and I could trust him. And I mean, that obviously helped, but you couldn't find a better match. And plus our personalities are pretty opposite, actually. I mean, he's my older brother, and a lot of people get kind of shocked at that when they hear that because they think I'm older because I'm kind of more of I'm the no guy. I'm the good cat, bad cop, good cop guy, and everybody loves Kyle. He's Norm. He has a hard time saying no to anybody, and So it makes a great a great partnership because a lot of times I'm the guy that is a sense of reason when it comes to certain things, and over the 25 years, this is our 25th year in business together. I can literally only think of two, maybe three arguments we've been in 25 years. And by the way, our first big argument was he took my book from the front desk where we used to have a scheduling book like they used to back in old dentist and doctor's offices where you'd write your name in the 30-minute slot and people would book out. And he wanted to get rid of the book, and he bought a computer for the front desk, and we were going to do our scheduling on the computer. And I was like, absolutely not. This is not how we did that, and I couldn't have been more wrong about that, by the way. So it's been a great ride with him.
So it's interesting because you guys are very different, which I think is really important for anybody in business. That don't go into business with your best friend because you can trust him and you like him. Go into business with your best friend because you trust them, you like them, but they're also different than you. They bring something different to the table. But I often find that when you bring other people in that are different, arguments do happen. There is tension. But you had 3 arguments in X amount of years. Like, how did you guys create such a great working environment?
It's a great question. I have to probably give Kyle the credit for this because I'm more the hothead. I'm probably more the competitor of the two of us, and him being the older brother. I'm sure it's kind of hard sometimes when your little brother is getting on to you or getting in an argument with you. Because Kyle Casey, he's one of the strongest human beings ever. He could probably hit me on top of the head and break my ankles. So luckily he's never done that. So his temperament and personality is what makes this work. Is that he's able to check his ego, and sometimes little brother I may even cross the line sometimes and get a little demanding with him, but that's the only way it works, because if you have 2 people with my personality, Casey, it just flat, like you said, it would not work. And if you had 2 people with Kyle's personality, to be honest with you, it probably wouldn't work that way either. So it just couldn't be a better fit.
And I think one of the other things I asked you advice, gosh, this was probably 10 years ago. And I said, what advice would you give to a 28-year-old Cade when I was 28? And you said, some things just aren't that big of a deal. And I wrote that down and I have it here on my wall. And I think that probably helps you guys too, because it's like, you know what? All right, this broke. This wasn't right. We messed up here. This happened. All right, let's learn, let's grow, let's improve. Let's not let this boil over. So I think it's probably both of your mentality and mindset helps as well.
It's actually really good advice just in life in general. Even in a marriage, right? Sometimes you look back at some arguments with your spouse and you're like, man, that was stupid. It's just, life's too short. I remember, Casey, you were a young, fiery entrepreneur, and I remember saying that to you. Hey, there's some things you just got to let go. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth the fight. And you're going to make mistakes. People with our personality that are entrepreneurs at heart and they're go. I remember I had a guy that worked for me who was for years, and I called him a bean counter. He was so methodical. And there's 2 people I want around me in my life that are methodical, and that's my doctor and my lawyer. Other than that, I don't want really methodical people to work for me. I told him one time, I said, he when he would take an order over the phone, he was dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It'd take 30 minutes on the phone with somebody that's ordering 3 bats, and I told him, I said, hey, I could do 10 deals by the time you do 1. And you know what? I'll screw up on a couple of them, but 8 of them I hit home runs on. And I would rather you do 10 deals a day, screw up on 2 of them, than do 1 deal a day and it's perfect. You're never going to grow with that mentality and with that mindset. And that's why, sales guys, a lot of the great sales guys, they're, some people call them a little slimy or snaky or whatever, but it's because they're go and moving to the next, the next deal. And you can't just sit and loom on one deal and be successful by being methodical. I think a lot of smart people get around to doing nothing all day, and I think that's why I think it's difficult for a lot of high IQ people to be successful and being an entrepreneur, because you have to multitask, and you gotta move to the next topic. But
yeah, really good. So I want you to speak to two different type of people that are listening to this. One, the entrepreneur that's building a business. They're in the grind. They're trying to grow. They're you 15, 20 years ago. And then the next one is the baseball coach, because you guys have not only built amazing baseball academies, but an amazing, travel ball program and some amazing teams there. So first, speak to the entrepreneur that's growing a business. What advice do you wish you had back when you were starting that you want to give to them today?
The first advice I'd give them is, first of all, you got to have a good product, and then you got to have a good culture with your business. And a lot of times it's not inventing something or recreating the wheel. You can take I feel like we took a complex product, which baseball academies, believe it or not, they're complex, and that's why there's, think of every little baseball academy in your hometown, they've all shut down. There's a reason why we have 150 locations and haven't had any closures. Is we took a complex concept and we simplified it. And there's a kind of a hero of mine. It was my dad's boss years ago. Was Art Williams. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia, actually. Started A.L. Williams in the 70s, and he took on the billion-dollar industry of insurance. And insurance at the time was only whole life insurance, and he was the first guy that sold term insurance. And he took a complicated product like whole life and made it simple with term insurance. So I think that's something entrepreneurs need to really think about, instead of trying to invent something or create something. And like I said, we didn't invent baseball academies; they were around before us. But we took a complex company, and at the time you had all these mom and pop stores, sporting goods stores, your local hometown sporting goods store where dad was sweeping the floor and daughter was working the cash register and mom was in the back pressing on numbers on uniforms. And we took kind of two companies, baseball academies and your hometown sporting goods store, and we combined them under one set of overhead, right? So you don't have two separate overheads, and it made it successful. There's been other people who have tried to do certain things. I know Taco Bell and Kentucky Fried Chicken. I've seen them try to combine their stores, and have one set of overhead. So as a young entrepreneur, think about that. Think about how to take maybe two complex things and combine them, and so they're profitable and make them successful.
Great. 150 locations. Fantastic. Let's talk about the coach. You've done a lot of coaching yourself, highly trusted and respected in that realm. We got coaches on this, whether they're a baseball coach or a basketball coach, whether they're coaching, little league or high school or college. What advice do you have for coaches out there that are kind of leading the next generation?
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find a human that's thrown more BP than me. Like I said, 12 years doing lessons, 7 days a week, 7, 8, 9 hours a day. My advice would be a couple things. Number one is if you're coaching a team, try to find 10 seconds during that season to try to put your arm around every kid, and let them know you love them and you believe in them, even if it's the worst player on the team. Try to make a connection. I have a running joke with my wife. I'm always the old man in the wedding. I've been a groomsman in more weddings than I'd like to even admit, and there are always these young kids that I coached, but because you're not just coaching, and you're not, it's not all about the win. You're somewhat of a life coach to these kids, and you're an impact on these kids' lives. So always try to find the time to put your arm around every kid and let them know you're there for them and you're thinking about them. The second advice I would give, mainly to coaches or instructors, is make sure you check your ego at the door. And just because something worked for you as a player, it does not always work for the player. And there's so many coaches out there. I call them cookie cut coaches. They try to cookie cut every hitter. They teach the same load. They teach the same, launch, hand placement, launch angle of your bat. Everything's the same. And not everybody is built the same. You wouldn't teach, Ichiro to hit like Mark McGwire, and you wouldn't teach Mark McGwire to swing like Ichiro. It would completely kill their game. So you have to understand the body type of every player. Is he a leadoff guy? Is he a four-hole guy? Is he a first baseman type guy? Or is he a gapper? I call them gappers, a doubles guy. And I used to tell kids every time I worked with them, the first time I worked with them, as I tell them, I say, hey, if I ever tell you to try something, try it a couple times, but if it's uncomfortable, let me know, because we won't do it. You cannot hit if you're uncomfortable. I don't care what anybody says. So if it's not comfortable for the player, it's not going to work. I don't care if it worked for you, if it worked for, Babe Ruth. It's just every kid's built different. Every kid's swing's different. Every kid's game is different. So just like same thing in pitching. Every pitcher's their arm angles are different, and they're more effective at a certain arm angle, and it might not be the arm angle you pitched at. So understand what your weaknesses and strengths are, and understand that everybody's built different, every kid's built different, all their mentalities are different. So you can't coach every kid the same way you were coached and the way you were successful.
That's good. And I think both of those points, whether it was put your arm around somebody and let them know you care, and or you can't teach everybody the same way, that's whether you're leading a baseball player or leading somebody in business. And that was one of my mistakes, Cade, early on, is I tried to make a bunch of Caseys out there because I knew if I could create other people that were as good as I was at this, we'd probably be okay. But I was doing it in a way where I was trying to put my own process on other people, and it just didn't work. And that's where I had to learn that everybody's going to do things differently, and how they're going to get there is going to be different. But as long as they get there, they get there. And I think that's one of the things that you taught me, is just how to be a better leader, right? And you gave me so much really good feedback. And you were one of those people in my life that you knew when to, kick me in the pants or pat me on the back or put your arm around me and say, you got it. I believe in you, or figure your stuff out, get it going. And I think everybody needs somebody like that. And just, it's been super cool to see the business that you've built with DBAT, 150 academies, 25 years now. What's on the horizon? And then how does somebody learn more about DBAT, and whether they're looking to get into the business or visit a location? Talk about that.
I'd like you to ask me that question again in a minute, but I want to tell a quick story about you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Two things I remember, Casey. I remember telling you one time on the phone, you were here at the office, and you handed me this stack of papers, and you said, "Hey, I'm putting this, procedures and operations together for all the employees, some rules and regulations for them to follow. I would like you to take a look at it." And you handed me the papers, and I flipped them back to you, and I said, I got an idea, Casey. Why don't you figure out how to get your employees to love you first? And I remember saying that to you, and it was very interesting, because I'll get to it in a minute, that how much you changed. I mean, you changed like dramatically over a year period. And another meeting, you came into Dallas, and you were talking about how do I get memberships up, and you made this point a minute ago. And you're like, I'm training these guys on how to sell it, and they sell it this way and do this. And I said, Casey, nobody's going to sell them as good as you are. You're the best salesperson I've ever met in my life. And why are you trying to create another Casey? There's only one Casey. and no one's ever going to care about your business more than you. And you left that meeting, and at the time, I don't know if you remember this, but at the time you had about 186 members. You'd been open about a year, and it was the craziest thing because that meeting was actually in March. By that December, and by the way, which is the slower time of the year for us, this fall, that December, Brad Bronner, my right-hand man, came to me and said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this. Casey's at 500 members. You were the first academy to ever hit 500 members." And I said, "What?" I said, "That's impossible. I just met with him, 6 months ago, and we're in the slow season. He couldn't have grown 500 members in the slow season. There's no way." And I don't even know if you know this. I actually told him to get on an airplane and get down to Buckhead. And I said, "Find out what they're doing wrong. They're selling these the wrong way." I had no idea you were doing it, and I thought you were still having your people do it. And I said, we're going to have a mass flux of cancellations because they're not selling these right because it's impossible to grow that much. And he came back and goes, "Nope, Casey's doing it." I said, "Casey he's came downstairs," is what he said. You were upstairs managing everybody from the upstairs office. He said he's came downstairs. He's on the floor, and I listened to his spiel, and he's the best. And I don't know if you remember this. I had you speak at our owners meeting the next year on memberships, and it was unbelievable. You probably don't know this part, but when I told this was back when I only probably had about, 25 locations, maybe 30 or 40 owners at the owners meeting. And I told them you were speaking, and a lot of my older owners were like, "Oh gosh, Casey's speaking, this young kid, what does he know?" And the next year they requested me to have you speak again. And that's when they invited their GMs. At first, we didn't have our GMs going to the owners meeting, and they were making their GMs film you with their phones because it was such a great spiel on the value of a membership and just, your sales tactics. But anyway, I wanted to brag on you about that. It's just watching you grow over those years was phenomenal. I mean, you were number one, I think, in every, dang near every category for years. So anyway, I wanted to tell that quick story. You can go ahead and ask my ending question.
No, I think the mistakes that I made in business early on in my career was I was the guy up in the owner's suite trying to tell people how to run their team when I never played the game myself in a lot of my businesses. So I think a lot of business owners, a lot of leaders, they got to get in there. They got to roll their sleeves up. They got to do the dirty work. They got to learn it, but then they got to put the system in place and then teach it to somebody else to let them get the end result, but do it their way. And I just micromanaged a lot of people because one, it had to be done my way or it wasn't good enough. And I think that was back, Cade, to my identity and worth and value is even if somebody else was successful, I was almost mad because I'm like, well, why are they successful? Because that almost looked at me as, well, if they're good at it, then what's my value? Why am I even here anymore? And I would almost like blow things up just so I could fix them to feel better about myself. But once I realized like, all right, my identity is not in this. This DBAT, this is not my business. It's our business. It's our company. And I started putting my arm around my employees and my customers. And people always ask, do you miss DBAT? And I'm like, I miss the people. I don't miss BP or the cages or I miss the camps and the kids and the parents and the moms and the dads and the like that's what I miss is the people. And that's why I think what you've built is so special because it's so much more than just baseball. And it's really cool. So thanks for that, Cade. I appreciate that. And you were a coach and I needed that coach. A few minutes in your office, right? Like impacted my life forever. So that's what I want to encourage everybody, whether you have somebody like a Cade in your life that can ask you the tough question, that could kick you in the pants when you need to be kicked, that can put your arm around you, have that. So really special there. So DBAT, 150 locations, 25 years. What do you got going on?
Well, our biggest year was 2019. We opened 24 locations, and I thought it was going to kill me. If you do the math, that's about one every week, every other weekend opening. But honestly, Casey, I thought with the interest rates going up, 6 or 8 months ago or a year ago, and everything happening, I honestly thought things would slow down a little bit, but it's really been the opposite. We've already this year. Matter of fact, I just counted them today. We've already opened up 16 locations this year, and the crazy number is we have 36 under construction, which means they've already signed a lease and they're opening, and so we have 36 locations opening in the next 6 to 7 months. So we'll over double our busiest year we ever had. And I will tell you, though, the good news is it looks tougher on paper, but a lot of our growth has been internal growth, which means that it's our current franchisees opening up their second, third, and fourth locations, and as you know, Casey, that's easier growth for us. I'm not going to say it's super easy, but they've already been through the process. They've been through training. They've been through the construction phase once. A lot of times I kind of feel guilty. I'm like, hey, can you send me some pictures of the location? They're like, no, we got it handled. And sometimes I've got to let go too, Casey, not trying to micromanage them, because I'm like, yeah, this is their third location they've opened. They're not going to make any of those mistakes. I don't have to go over that. So we've been blessed that a lot of our growth has been internal growth. But what does the future hold? Casey, I never be honest. I wanted to grow. My original goal was to do 6 or 8 a year. I wanted slow but steady and smart growth, but the brand has gotten just so big, and we have our locations in China, 6 locations in China, and we're opening up our first one in Canada. I honestly not sure that we're going to expand much more out of the country, maybe other than Canada and maybe a few other smaller places. There's plenty of growth here in the United States. We're not a McDonald's or a Subway where you can put one on every corner, so there is a limit to that. Probably that limit in my calculations is around maybe 350 before the market gets saturated. But there's also there's also booming towns that grow. I mean, the little town that I lived in 6 years ago had 6,000 people, and there's 48,000 people in it now, 6 years later. So there's also new markets that pop up, and demographics may change in some of our older markets as well, and we have to move them. So, but it's a tough question. Right now, all we're trying to do is we're trying to service our franchisees, put better systems together, which is something I learned from you, and we've done a really good job of that. COVID was actually a blessing for us, because we hit the pause button and did not do any presentations, weren't trying to open any stores, and we spent a year putting our HR manual together, and our getting started manual and our construction manuals together, and putting our systems together. So we want to continue to better our systems. We want to make sure we stay out in front of technology. Technology, as you know, has gotten huge in this game. If you just watch a Major League Baseball game today, you'll see that technology is a big part of the game now. So I'm kind of leaning on my brother on that, and a couple of guys in the office, Jake, who's sitting here with me today, to make sure that we stay in the forefront of the technology side of the game. So I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of where our mind is today.
That's great. So somebody's interested in visiting a DBAT location. How do they find one?
Well, you can go on our website and click on locations. It's dbat.com. And we also have an app as well, a DBAT app. And I believe we're in around 40 states right now. We're in most of the major cities around America. If they're interested in DBAT the business, there's a dbatfranchises.com is our website that has a lot of frequently asked questions and what we're all about, and they can go on there and fill out a inquiry form and you'll be contacted within 24 hours from one of my 3 sales guys, and then at that point we kind of vet you, and then if you're vetted, then you come into a presentation here at the corporate office in Carrollton, and we after that, if you're still interested in moving forward, we issue the FDD, and we start the real estate search, and start making sure that the location you're looking at is viable. So that's kind of the process.
This is great. Cade, well, thank you so much. Super cool to see your guys' journey as a company, and thank you so much for what you've meant and done for me and my family.
You too, Casey. And by the way, my wife says to tell you hi. That's what I was talking to you today.
Give her a hug for me, and give Kyle a hug too, okay?
Good to see you, buddy.
Dugout Nation, wow, blown away by our time with DBAT Baseball and Softball Academy CEO Cade Griffis. I personally love those baseball stories, but he surely dropped some amazing life and business lessons as well. Here are my big 2 takeaways. Business isn't a hobby. Hobbies are something that you invest time in, energy in, but ultimately they're to have fun and be fulfilling. But if you start a business, which should be a money-making venture, it shouldn't be viewed as a hobby. Don't have something else competing for your interest or your time, especially if you're investing in somebody else's business. Make sure it's their number 1 priority, and make sure if it's you or it's somebody else that you know that's building a business, you're gonna have to live it. If it's something that you want to be great at, starting a business, building one, it has to be the top of your mind, something that consumes you. It's not to say that it should take precedent over family or other things, but at the end of the day, there's seasons. And when you're building a company and when you're in scaling mode, you have to have the support of your family, whether it's a spouse or those in your inner circle, because it's going to be a lot of early mornings and a lot of long nights. But if you have a solid team around you and lean on others who have been there and done that, you too can make it. And number 2, choosing the right business partners and key team members is key to growing your business. You have to like who you work with. You have to trust who you work with, but you have to bring somebody else in that brings something different to the table. Just because you have good chemistry and they're fun to work with, that doesn't mean they're the right person for you to help you build your business. Bring in other people that have different personality profiles, different skill sets, somebody that's already been there and done that. And if you choose the right people based on culture and skill set, you'll be in really good shape. Surround yourself with key people that have already been there and done that. They built something that you're ultimately looking to do. And if you hire A players, you too will be able to make your business vision become a reality.